Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. Today I'm joined by Charlotte Windebank, who is the co-founder and MD of First and a director of the Startup Awards Northeast. I've known Charlotte for a few years now, and I've always been really impressed by her passion and drive for creating schemes to support and encourage disadvantaged people to enter into the world of entrepreneurship. And it's a world that she's very familiar with, having started a number of businesses herself, but also having supported lots of people over those years in creating businesses from scratch. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about her story, but also some of the stories of the people that she has supported. Hi Charlotte, thanks for joining me today. I think we're just going to go straight into it. First, I can't tell from the title what that does. Would you like to explain to those who don't know what First's all about?
Yes, certainly. So First is essentially a learning and development agency, and we empower enterprise and entrepreneurship for underrepresented and under-resourced communities across the Northeast and beyond. And what that looks like on a day-to-day basis is, so we deliver informal enterprise and entrepreneurial activities for startups, university students, graduates, schools, colleges, all of that kind of stuff. And then on the other side of that, we have accredited courses in which we do level 1 and 2 entry-level qualifications, and that's predominantly with devolved and local authorities.
Wow, so is your sort of target market, is that kids in schools who are coming out of schools who perhaps don't know what to do next, or is it adults? What's the demographic that you work with?
Yes, so we used to do a lot with schools and colleges, but then the pandemic kind of just sort of closed all that naturally because enterprise and entrepreneurship wasn't a priority. Quelle surprise for teachers at that time.
Although it should be, shouldn't it?
Yes.
It should be.
Yeah, it is.
At a time of crisis like that, it's a time when innovation can really thrive.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, the resilient skills that you can get from even trying out starting a business is so transferable into other areas of your life. And I've always found that with my business skills, how I then are able to cope with things that happen in my personal life, because I've had, 100 no's in the business, so I'm a bit more resilient with other stuff. So we used to do a lot with schools and colleges. The main bulk of our work now is through local and combined authorities, and that's the adult market. And it's people that are basically at a fork in the road in terms of their direction. They may have been made redundant, they may have come out of education and aren't able to get a job in what their degree is in and are a bit stuck. So they'll do a level 1 with us, which is very much exploring what they're passionate about, a safe space to chat with other like-minded people who are in a similar situation. And not necessarily have a business idea. And I find that that's really important because a lot of people think that you need a business idea, which is understandable. You have to have this killer business idea when actually you just have to be curious. And if I look back at my own entrepreneurial journey and the times when it was really hard, even before we registered the company, I know that those moments were part of that journey to start up. So for example, coming out of education, not knowing anyone, been told this narrative that I could be anything or anyone, and then graduating in 2008 when there was a big economic crash. But I didn't even know it was going on. I didn't watch the news, I didn't know. Then you sort of blame yourself, oh, it's me, I'm not good enough for the jobs market. And you go to your comfortable areas, which is hospitality, or you end up in a call center. And again, great transferable skills to then apply for when you're running a business, talking to people, like everybody needs that. But there was a particular moment where I was at the job center and I'd messed up my appointment, and I went in and they had a bouncer on the door, and he just started laughing at me because I'd messed up my appointment, and I just broke down in tears. And he sort of was like, oh God, It's like, don't know what to do with it. And I think back now to that moment, and there's lots of reasons why we started the business. It's not just one thing that suddenly makes you go, oh, right, I'm ready now. It's lots of things that happen all at once. But I look back now and I think, God, if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't be so passionate now about helping people who are a bit stuck, because that's exactly what happened to me. You know, I realise I've gone on a total tangent.
No, I think that will resonate with a lot of people. I think we are very good now. I mean, you know, the criticism was always of parents, of schools, of society, of not giving kids aspiration and hope. But what we tend to do now is say to people, you can be anything you want, you can do anything you want, but you've got to do it on your own. And they haven't got to clear out, they've got the skills, they've got the knowledge, they haven't got the experience to be able to do it. And I think, you know, your experience there will really resonate with a lot of people who will have felt very lost at some point in time. So when you meet people, do you know instantly whether they're going to be a good entrepreneur?
That's such a good question. And yes, in my opinion, there's this spark. There's this like wicked look in their eyes. They're a little bit unusual. And they're passionate, and it might not be the idea that then makes them all the money, but when they talk about what they do, they come alive, and you know, and it's part of them, and you can see it, and we see it a lot. So we do a lot of university enterprise weekends and stuff, and they stand out so dramatically because they're at the front, they're asking questions, they're the humble leaders, they're the charismatic. Or they're, on the other side of that, they're the really studious ones, the really thoughtful ones, the ones that come up to you afterwards and go, oh, could I have an hour chat with you online after this? I've got some ideas. You know, it's the ones that can see opportunity in the environment that they're in.
So do you think it's possible for, if you've got that entrepreneurial spark and you've got that sort of X factor type thing, do you think it's possible, even if your business idea is absolutely awful, to make a success of it?
Yes, so I think when we look at starting a business, we always think of the symbolism of the light bulb. And I always think that that's quite detrimental in a way, because it's just a single light bulb. And if you look at the journey of the light bulb in terms of the invention, how many iterations until they actually got the light bulb? So I always think of starting a business like a set of fairy lights. So you have one idea and then that will lead to another, and that will then lead on. And some might be broken and not that good, but ultimately it's a journey rather than that one startup idea. And it's always very rare that the ideas you have in the beginning are the ones that are going to make all the money. And that's why it's when investors are looking at pitches, you know, you could have all these fancy stats and, you know, the total reachable market is 12 billion or whatever. What they really care about is the person, because that's all going to change what you're pitching in a year. But you might change a little bit, but ultimately they need to see if you're the right person to build a business.
So you're helping. So do you have a sort of dual role in helping people to develop the skills that they need, but also to develop the business idea if they've got one?
Yeah, so we always see it as the personal development side of starting a business. So we'll work on the person and we'll get them to a point where they are empowered to take those next steps. So it's very much about not doing the introductions for someone. It's showing them, right, this is how you find a networking event on Eventbrite or NetKnow or the Growth Hub. So it's very much that signposting piece. And we get them to a point where they're ready to share their ideas with other people. And at that point, we will then showcase and connect them to other business support agencies. So we're called first because we're that first bit of support for then someone to have that safe space with us and then go, actually, do you know what? Self-employment and entrepreneurship is for me. I want to go for it. And now I can go and speak to P&E, I can go speak to TEDco confidently about my ideas, and I can go out networking and meet the people that are going to ultimately help my business grow.
And can you tell me about some of the sort of real success stories that you've had, some of the ones that really stand out in your mind as going, oh, I'm so pleased we work with them because just look at what they're doing now?
Yeah, there's There was an amazing case study, and ultimately a startup will access support from everywhere. And so they should, like they need to go to an opening of an envelope when you're first starting out, because you just need to be a sponge and soak it all up. But I feel like we did play a part in their journey. So it was low carbon materials, and they are fantastic PhD graduates from Durham University. And we were running some networking events alongside Marek and the team, the enterprise team at Durham University. And they were very informal, in a bar. We'd get some startup entrepreneurs there. And I remember it so distinctly. They came in and they were finishing their PhDs, and they were loose cannons. What I love about when we do networking events, I always ask at the beginning, so who knows why they're here and who doesn't? And the people that don't know why they're here, they're the ones I love, because they've just come and they just want to experience something. And that was very much their kind of tone. And they heard from the entrepreneurs, they got inspired. They then accessed the support from the university, which is incredible. They did Startup Awards Northeast. They've done various other competitions as well. But what they then went on to achieve was to be finalists in the Earthshot Prize. And they are an amazing role model for graduates coming out of our universities to show what's possible, and not having that finite idea, but the curiosity to explore and apply their PhDs to that commercial setting. Yeah. And now to be on that world stage in front of the most famous leaders ever, it just shows what's possible.
And great to have played a part in their development as well. It's brilliant. So you mentioned the Startup Awards, and that's something that I know that we're involved with, and we really look forward to every year, because it's such an uplifting thing to be involved with. But when somebody hears the Startup Awards, what they will picture in their mind is probably a big room at one of the large hotels in the region, with everybody sitting in black tie, clapping when people go up to receive an award for something that they know nothing about. That's probably the furthest you could get from what your awards are like. So can you tell people who haven't been involved in them what they are like?
Yes, certainly. So to give some context about why we do it. So if you were to compare the Northeast to all of the other regions outside of London, we would have an additional 26,000 new startup businesses generating economy and jobs for our region. So those 26,000 startups that we could tap into, where are they? Who are these people that we need to find in order to generate these new businesses? And my argument is, and lots of other people see, that if we were to encourage underrepresented founders more so in the Northeast to consider self-employment, this is where those numbers could come from. So if you look at the national averages in terms of employment rates for underrepresented founders, it's all through ONS data. So it's women, ethnic minorities, and disabled people. You look at our stats as a region, compare them to the UK stats. So for example, you look at ethnic minority workers in the Northeast, 14.5% of them are unemployed. And you compare that to the UK average, and there's 6.8%. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of people. 32% of disabled people are unemployed, and that's 4.5% higher than the UK average. If you look at women in business compared to men, it's half the rate. And as I said before, these are hundreds of thousands of people that could be contributing to our society, but they just don't know that the business world exists yet. So Startup Awards is that vehicle to make everyone and anyone, again, who's curious about self-employment, or who has a business idea, or who is running a business for 3-4 years along the line, to actually just give them that injection into the business community. And we base it on the SOUP model from Detroit. So this is a community-led model where people would go into a community space, they'd they give a donation on the door. In return, they get a cup of soup, and they would listen to communities pitch for funding. And that money that is generated on the door is then given to the community group that receives the most votes on the night.
Okay.
So it's a very autonomous way of looking at generating support. And because people in the room are the judges, everyone's a judge. It's not just these elitist Dragon Den panels. Everyone is involved. Everyone is listening to the pitches. So we replicate that in Startup Awards Northeast. And you hear these amazing pitches coming from the heart of people that are just at the start or running businesses 3 or 4 years down the line. And you vote for your winner. And at the end, you know, there's a big celebration, but everyone gets something out of it, because even if you don't win, there'll be someone in that room that knows someone that can help them. And it's then the start of their journey. And we do a lot of data capture, and 70-80% of the startups that go through it have no idea that this support exists. And they've been running their businesses just on their own, thinking this is just what it is. I've got Google and I've got my friends and family, and that's all there is. And then you see this other world, and you can literally see them like, oh my God, there is so much support out there. So it's that vehicle to just get people into the business community.
Well, I mean, I think it's brilliant, and I think it's not just one event either, is it? There's a whole package of support around the people that are nominated for the awards, and then afterwards as well to help them along on their journey. So I think it's something quite special.
It is, and you know, you guys at Square One are the absolute living, breathing proof of that, because of the support that you have then given the winners of the competition and others that have reached out to you, you know, and you can see it on your LinkedIns, and you can see, Sam and Sarah and everyone have been to your events, and the power that they, and the opportunity that they have then got through your networks as well at Square One is just, you can't put a price on that.
No.
And that's what it's all about, that legacy piece as well.
It's part of that, about collaboration. We're much stronger together, aren't we, if we do stuff together?
Yeah.
Just popping in to say, if you are enjoying the conversation so far and want to make sure you keep up to date with other episodes, then please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Let's jump back into the conversation now. You've mentioned curiosity a few times. I take it that you are a curious person, and that is part of your journey. Where does that curiosity come from?
Wow, that's a question. It probably stems from being a child and that imagination, that creativity, and I do consider myself a creative person. Not necessarily that I'm great with a paintbrush, but I do like to create solutions to challenges that people face and the world faces. And I think that curiosity has always been with me around questioning the status quo. Like, why are things the way they are, and what can be done about that? And I think at school, I always felt very constrained by the rules, because I know that half of the students there, we didn't fit in. And we weren't necessarily, about to be expelled. And we weren't high achievers. I call us the vanilla tribe.
Mid-table mediocrity or something like that.
And we just drifted.
Yeah.
And we became very, disengaged with the system. And the curiosity piece was then, in extracurricular activities, then was able to achieve that. And in school, it's very much taken out of you, because you don't want to be questioning the teacher the entire time, because that would be exhausting for them. And so it was like, how do you then apply that in an extracurricular sense, if that makes sense?
Yes, it does. No, it does make sense. I think you're absolutely right. I think, again, it's these things are so important as life skills, aren't they? Being curious, but we don't focus on that with children, because there's a national curriculum that has to be followed, and it becomes quite process driven. So you've talked a bit about the sort of your school life, and also that light bulb moment when you cried outside the job centre, which led you to sort of going into entrepreneurship. But you didn't just go straight into first from that. What's been the in between bit?
Yeah, so it was really being a freelancer. And again, it's another forgotten piece of the entrepreneurial journey. A lot of business owners, you see them as they are now with, staff, office and all of that stuff. But that bit before that is essential. And a lot of people will go down that self-employed route. So what I was doing was youth work, music events, helping host business events too. So I was just collecting all of these jobs to figure out what it was that I really enjoyed doing, and a bit of hospitality on the side as well. So I went for various interviews. I went for hundreds of interviews, but I never got a job.
Why do you think you were unemployable?
Who knows? I remember one, so there was one interview that I did get the job, and it was in a bank at Cheltenham, Gloucester.
Wow.
Old school. And I remember my dad going, "Oh, finally, she's got a proper job.
Got to do something normal."
But then he met Charlie Holt at a beer festival. My dad knew that I was into events, and he sort of started speaking about me. And I'd only been in the job in the bank for 6 months. And then I emailed Charlie and said, "Oh, look, can I come and run some events at Holt's Yard?" And he was like, "Well, you could come do an internship if you want." So I packed the paid job in to do an unpaid job for 3 months at Holt's Yard. And my dad was like, "No." But then that led me into running the Clock Tower Cafe for years.
I didn't know you'd done that.
Yeah, and again, that was a brilliant opportunity to run a business, but with someone else's money.
Have a play, see what worked.
Yeah, exactly. And again, in hindsight, you think of all these things, and at the time you're like, "Oh, what am I doing? I'm just making sandwiches," and I'm a very driven person. But you don't realise that what you're doing every day is leading you up to that moment. And I think we need to place more value on those experiences as well that people go through to then start a business. Because I think a lot of people think, "Oh, right, now I'm successful now because I finally started the business." And it's like, you have been successful throughout because of what you have achieved. And I know that I and so many others don't ever go like, "Oh, wow, that was good, well done." We were just always forward thinking. And that is a common trait, again, of entrepreneurship. I'm always 6 to 12 months ahead.
Yeah.
And doing my MBA, I realised I'm not a natural reflector. And we always need to make sure that we're celebrating those wins when they happen.
And the podcast's called Fear Less, Do More. You've taken a number of sort of fearless steps along the way, a number of sliding doors moments where things could have gone different ways. When you're talking to young, and by young I mean inexperienced entrepreneurs now, when you see their fear, how do you help them to overcome that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dichotomy, because in education we're always taught to find a solution. It's very get the right answer. You have to get the right answer. So when you're teaching entrepreneurial education, we have to almost change their mindset and say, starting a business it's better to fail. And they're like, "But I can't fail," because failure obviously means that you don't pass your GCSEs, you don't pass your A-levels, you can't get a job. You're drummed in that failure that is horrendous. And then we'll work with them and we'll say, "No, this is part of the process. Fail fast.
Yeah.
Get to the answers that you need in order to continue the journey. Get the clues that you need." I always use the metaphor again about the rocket. So if you look at a lot of startup symbolism, you'll see, and you if you haven't seen it already, you will see it a lot now. You will see this rocket, and it will be launch pads, it will be Ignite, and there's nothing wrong with that, because I think there is that element of, that excitement and that innovation piece. But ultimately, if you actually look at the process of creating a rocket, you know, you have to be an absolute bloomin' expert rocket scientist. You have to pour billions of pounds of money into it. You can't test it before it flies. You just have to gingerly press the button and hope that it goes up into space. And if you don't, and if it doesn't, then you're screwed. Whereas I always think of starting a business and anything really, like getting a job or anything, think of it as a paper aeroplane. You know, you can pinch a bit of paper. It takes, 10 seconds to make. If you fly it and it doesn't fly, it doesn't matter. You can pick it up and you can do it and you can change it and then you can fly it again at no cost. And how it will develop and grow is by keep testing it. And so when I'm speaking to students and graduates, for me, it's all about that market research piece. So we actually we'll actually get them out on the weekend to go out and speak to customers and test their ideas. And it's amazing when you share that's what they're actually going to be doing. You get this visceral like, and that's that moment when you know you're getting through, because they're unlearning everything that they've been told, and it's an actual application of learning that they then go and explore, and it's pushing all them out that comfort zone, and it's incredible to see it.
And what, from your point of view, what's been your sort of most fearful moment where you've thought, I just really don't think I can do this?
There's been plenty on a daily basis. No, I mean, it's definitely subsided, I think. So there was one in about 2016 where we had some incredible contracts with Voda in North Tyneside to do some enterprising projects together. And I'd almost kind of got a bit comfortable with the income that we'd made from that. And understandably, because it was our first contract, and I didn't think, oh God, I've got to go out and get some more work now. And I'd left it a little bit too late. And I was really like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Like, I've got a member of staff now. And it was all right before because it was just me, and I could have just reduced the wage a bit, I guess, but with a full-time member of staff. And I remember there was this networking event, and I was like, oh, I really don't want to go, because if someone asks, oh, how are you doing? I'm just going to be like, oh, crap. And she literally dragged me onto the metro and said, no, you're going, this is important. Because there were going to be lots of movers and shakers there, and I was like, oh God, okay, right, let's go, let's do it. And I went there, and someone asked me the question that I knew, and he's a fabulous guy, and he's just like, so how's it going? And I just went, oh my God, it's SH1T. And he just looked at me and went, Charlotte, the Northeast needs you. Don't you dare give up. Oh. And I just sort of went, okay. And I just kept going. But it just took that one sentence from someone to change my mindset and just go, oh, do you know what? You're right. And again, that, the power of having that network and that one person to say, you can do this and I believe in you. So that was one. And then obviously running the business in a pandemic. I mean, goodness me, we basically were a startup again. First started in 2014. Those 6 years was almost building us up to this new business that we then had in 2020 and beyond. And I never forget seeing Rishi Sunak, because I was in the process of like, oh God, I'm going to have to make everyone redundant. I had this amazing business coach. She was like, this is what you do. This is how you do it. And I was just like, I was crying on a daily basis thinking, I'm going to have to make all these staff redundant. This is awful. And I never forget watching the news and seeing Rishi Sunak announce the furlough scheme. And I was just like, oh my God, like it was such a moment of hope. And again, the fact that my business was out of my control, and that was a really scary moment, because a lot of people start a business because they want to have the control over their own destiny. And at that moment, I didn't have control, and that was really, that was a lot. But we got through it, and we're still here.
But I think that's really, that's great that you share that vulnerability that you have, because I think there's too much in business. If, like you say, if you go to a network event, it's very rarely, if you say to somebody, how's business going, that they go, oh God, it's absolutely terrible. Everybody talks it up all the time.
Yeah.
And I think we need a lot more honesty.
Yeah.
Because then you'll get those words that will just make that difference and can turn it around. If you hadn't shared that, you might have given up.
God, yeah,
Because you
you're
wouldn't
right.
have had those words of encouragement. And I think it's so important that we create an environment that is a safe space, like you're doing for your students and your graduates. We need that more generally in business, because you don't know all the answers just because you've actually managed to set up a successful business.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a
No,
rant there.
you're absolutely right. And I think, so there was an exact example of that. So I was harping on about my cash flow a year ago because it was horrendous because of the contracts that we had. And then literally the other week, I had a pal come up to me and she was like, oh, do you know how you were struggling with your cash flow last year? It's happening to me now. Like, what did you do and stuff? And I just thought on that note, like, she wouldn't have shared that if I hadn't shared that a year ago. And it was just, the power of that honesty.
So when you set First up, what do you think you brought to that has made it a success from everything that had gone before?
Yeah, so when we set up First, Caroline and I, it was very much a skills match. So she had her extensive business understanding, her little black book of contacts, the networking events. And then for what I brought to the table was my youth working skills and that creativity and that desire to make it a better place for people coming out of education. And we then tested a lot of ideas for the next 6 years to find out what made money, what didn't, where our focus was. And if I look back now, the golden thread has always been that connecting piece. So we will connect people who do not have business connections in their friends and family into that business community that is the Northeast. And that has always been the desire. And I think what I brought to the table was that commercial piece. Like, so we were running networking events, but the amount of hours it takes to run a networking event is astronomical compared to the amount of money that you can bring in through a sponsorship model. I worked it out and I think it was like I was getting like 50p an hour, and I was just like, right, this is great. Everyone's getting a load of value out of it, but how can we change this model?
Make it more sustainable.
Exactly. So then we looked at tendering, so public procurement, and that took years and years to perfect. And I never thought I would use my English literature degree, but all of that writing I think really helped.
Yeah.
And
if only ChatGPT had been around then.
I know. But then I think about that, and I was like, well, actually, I'm now a very good tender writer with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So it's like this next level. Whereas if I was just using ChatGPT to write my tenders, I'd be crap. Yeah. So I think that perseverance with tender writing, because we got so many no's before we got a yes. But then when we got a yes,
a major success.
It was a game changer.
Yeah.
It was an absolute game changer. And I think that's what I brought to the table in terms of that resilience piece and that determination.
I haven't really talked much about you outside of work. Is there a you outside of work? is there a Charlotte that exists outside of First?
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, there wasn't for a number of years, and because I think when you start a business, it is an extension of your personality and your core beliefs. But after doing my MBA last year, one of the drivers was to sort of detach me from the business and find out a bit more about Charlotte and a bit more about what drives me, because I was always thinking of Charlotte as the business and what the business needs and wants are over my own. And so that was a brilliant, and I urge anyone who is running a business to look at the Level 7 Strategic Leadership Apprenticeship that's currently available. It's such an amazing opportunity to get that experience of an MBA. So you can get a top-up and do the full MBA, but what the government are offering in terms of that funding piece is amazing. So in terms of that Charlotte outside of work, she's definitely there, and she's getting stronger, and yeah.
So if you had a week off and you couldn't touch anything to do with work, what would you do with it?
So I'm a nightmare. I probably just watch hours and hours of Married at First Sight.
Everybody's got a guilty pleasure.
Yeah. See, if I'm left to my own devices, I tend to not do anything, and I think I don't like forward planning my own social life because I get a bit of FOMO. So if I plan stuff, it means that I can't say yes to other stuff. So it's quite spontaneous, and it tends to be a lot of family things. It tends to be, so I've got a lot of friends coming up to a significant birthday. So you have a whole year of these birthdays, don't you? And it's like, oh God, can we just go back to normal birthdays again? And, I'd love to do stuff with the house, but, my study is still half painted, and it has been like that since a couple of years ago. So it's getting that balance right, I think, and hopefully that will come. But when you love what you do so much in work, it doesn't feel like work. And this if you strip it all back from the business, this is my reason for living. Like, this is my purpose, and I'm so fortunate that I found my purpose. So I don't see it as work, if that makes sense.
It does. That's quite moving. And I think, to be honest, that's a really lovely way to end. Somebody who's found their purpose, who's clearly very, very purpose-driven person, and is delivering real value for a huge group of people that really need it. So thank you for what you do for the region and for the people in it, and thank you for joining me to tell me all about it today.
Thank you so much, Jill, for the opportunity.
Welcome. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. If you did, then please follow or subscribe. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, then you might enjoy this one here, which is also linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening.